The email came through on a Tuesday afternoon, right when I was wrapping up a client call. At first, I thought it was just another receipt for groceries or bills accidentally synced to our shared family cloud. But then I saw it, Paradise Cruise Lines. My husband's name was on the reservation. So was hers. Vanessa. A luxury suite, champagne package, couples massage, every detail screamed romance. The dates matched the exact week he was supposedly at a business conference in Seattle. My coffee sat untouched on the desk as I clicked through the itinerary. Ocean view balcony. Captain's table dinner. A love story carefully planned without me. 15 years of marriage reframed in a single, brutal moment. Before rage could even consume me, another notification popped up. This time a photo, Vanessa in lingerie, mirror selfie, caption, counting the days until you take this off. I should have cried. I should have screamed. Instead, my mind sharpened. Because I remembered a conversation I overheard at a charity gala months ago, Vanessa bragging loudly about her engagement. A flashy ring. A June wedding. A fiancé named Bradley. And that's when it clicked. My husband wasn't just betraying me. He was betraying him too. I stared at my phone, scrolling through Vanessa's public profile like it was a crime scene. Perfectly staged photos, beach getaways, champagne toasts, motivational captions about love and blessings. And then there he was. Bradley. Tall, polished Silicon Valley type. The kind of man who could afford that ring she flaunted under every sunset. His most recent post stopped me cold, heading on a solo trip before wedding madness begins. Need clarity before forever starts. The timestamp matched the cruise dates. A strange calm spread through me, like a storm deciding whether to unleash or to sharpen into lightning. This wasn't chaos, it was alignment. Fate had handed me not just evidence, but an ally. Within minutes, I was on Paradise Cruise Line's website. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Deck 10. Suite 1243 was theirs. I scrolled. Suite 1245 was still available. My credit card number felt like a weapon as I typed it in. The confirmation email arrived instantly. My heart hammered, but not from fear, from clarity. Then came the harder part. Reaching out to him. Bradley. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I drafted the email. Cold, factual, undeniable. Mr. Bradley, I believe we need to talk. It concerns your fiancée Vanessa and my husband. They have booked a Caribbean cruise together. Please see the attached confirmation. Would you be available for coffee tomorrow? I think it's a conversation you'll want to have. I reread it 3 times before hitting send. My body felt suspended, as though I'd stepped off a cliff and was waiting to see if the parachute would open. 3 minutes later, a reply pinged back. Just 3 words, where and when. The next morning, I sat in a corner booth at a downtown cafe, my hands wrapped too tightly around cappuccino. When Bradley walked in, I recognized him immediately. Taller in person, confident stride, but his eyes were hollow like mine. The eyes of someone whose world had just been split in 2. He didn't bother with introductions. He sat across from me and said in a voice like gravel, "Show me everything." So I did. I slid my phone across the table. The booking confirmations, the selfies, the emails. His jaw clenched tighter with every scroll. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Just 2 strangers bound by betrayal. When he finally looked up, there was no hesitation in his face. Only steel. Not just an affair. They plan a vacation. A future. They think we're fools. I nodded slowly. They think they're clever. But they've made a mistake. That was the moment it shifted. It wasn't just my war anymore. It was ours. 2 broken hearts, 1 shared goal. Revenge, but dressed in elegance. Bradley leaned in, lowering his voice. What exactly are you suggesting? I let a small, cold smile spread. I already booked the suite next to theirs. But watching them squirm alone isn't enough. I think we should both go. His lips curved into something darker than a smile. I'm in. We didn't clink glasses like conspirators. We simply sat there side by side and began to plan the most twisted vacation of our lives. The week before the cruise felt like an alternate reality. I moved through my days playing the role of the dutiful wife, all while hiding the arsenal of dresses, heels, and red lipstick I had bought for this trip. My husband still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still muttered, "Don't wait up," at night, believing I remained blissfully ignorant. Bradley and I met every evening after work in his temporary apartment downtown. We weren't lovers. We weren't even friends, not yet. But we became co-strategists, rehearsing lines and scenarios like actors preparing for opening night. We invented a backstory, old college friends who had reconnected by chance. We memorized the ship's layout, restaurants, pools, lounges. We mapped the timing of every activity Vanessa and my husband had booked. Coincidence would be our weapon, precision our armor. One night, Bradley spread a deck plan across the table between us. He wore the same expression he probably did in boardrooms, focused, ruthless. "Here," he said, pointing at the captain's gala. "We'll arrive 5 minutes after them. Not before. That way they see us. They'll know they're not alone." I watched him, noticing how his hands trembled just slightly when he mentioned Vanessa's name. That's when it hit me. Behind his controlled demeanor, he was just as raw as I was. We weren't just plotting revenge. We were holding each other up with the illusion of control. The morning of departure, I drove my husband to the airport. He wore his usual Navy suit, suitcase packed with conference, clothes I knew he wouldn't need. He leaned over to kiss me. "I'll call when I land in Seattle," he lied smoothly. I smiled back, the perfect wife, while imagining him walking straight into the jaws of his own destruction. "I'll miss you," I said sweetly, already picturing the dresses hanging in my own suitcase, hidden at Bradley's apartment, waiting for Miami. Once his plane was in the air, I drove directly to the port. Bradley was already there, waiting near the embarkation terminal, sunglasses on, posture steady. The moment I saw him, something in me eased. We weren't alone in this nightmare. "How are you feeling?" he asked, brushing his hand lightly against my shoulder as we queued to board. "I keep swinging between wanting to cry and wanting to push them both overboard," I admitted. He smirked faintly. "I already checked maritime law. Apparently, that would be frowned upon." The absurdity made me laugh for the first time in days. The sound felt foreign, fragile. But it reminded me that I was still alive, still capable of something other than rage. We boarded separately, as planned. My cabin was Suite 1245. I slid the key card, stepped inside, and immediately pressed my ear against the wall. Silence. Empty for now. Their flight hadn't landed yet. I unpacked methodically, hanging each dress with care. Dresses my husband had never seen. Dresses chosen not for him, but for me, for the woman he had underestimated. At 6:07 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Bradley. "They've boarded. Just saw them at check-in. They didn't see me." My stomach flipped. The moment wasn't hours away, it was now. I met Bradley 3 decks up at a quiet bar, far from the main dining halls. He already had a martini waiting for me. His toast was simple, sharp. "To the most twisted vacation either of us will ever take." I clinked my glass against his. May we survive it, with our dignity intact if not our marriages. For a beat, we just held each other's gaze. Not as co-conspirators. Not even as strangers, but as 2 people standing at the edge of a storm, about to step inside. That first night on the ship felt like balancing on the edge of a knife. I lay on the bed in my cabin, listening to muffled voices through the adjoining wall. My husband's voice, low, familiar, but tinged with a softness he hadn't used on me in years. Vanessa's laugh followed, light and syrupy, like a soundtrack to betrayal. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. This was why I was here. Not to sob into pillows, not to beg for scraps of honesty, but to watch them unravel under the weight of their lies. Bradley texted, "Dinner? Observation deck, 9 p.m. I slipped into a black dress that hugged me in all the right places, added lipstick I knew my husband hated, too bold, he always said, and walked out like I owned the night. When I reached the deck, Bradley was already there, leaning against the railing, city lights fading as the ship pushed out to sea. "You look," he stopped himself, eyes flicking briefly to the horizon. "Prepared. Better than devastated, right?" I replied, forcing a smirk. We ate under the stars, careful not to linger near the dining halls where our cheaters might appear. It wasn't time yet. The game required patience. Still, there was a strange thrill in knowing they were somewhere on this floating palace, indulging in fantasies they believed were secret. The next morning, the first coincidence unfolded. We joined the same shore excursion they had booked, a snorkeling trip in turquoise waters off a private island. Bradley and I arrived last to the briefing hut, holding hands like old lovers. When my husband turned and saw me, the blood drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. "Darling," I said smoothly, my voice steady, though my heart thundered. What a surprise. Vanessa froze, clutching her beach bag like a shield. Bradley leaned down and kissed my cheek with casual intimacy. "So this is the husband?" he asked, loud enough for both of them to hear. His smile was knife-sharp. My husband stammered, searching for words. What are you?" "On vacation," I cut in, looping my arm through Bradley's. "With an old friend." The guide interrupted, oblivious to the storm brewing. "Couples, please board the boat in pairs." So there we were, for people bound by betrayal, forced to sit side by side on a wooden bench as the boat carried us toward paradise. Vanessa's hand trembled in her lap. My husband kept darting glances at me, his mouth opening, closing, opening again. But every time, Bradley's presence silenced him. Underwater, surrounded by fish and coral, I felt strangely free. Salt burned my throat, but the mask hid my smirk. My husband swam a few feet away, reaching for Vanessa's hand, as if her touch could anchor him. He didn't realize that the more he clung to her, the more he tightened the noose around his own neck. Back on the boat, Bradley whispered against my ear, his breath warm. "He looks like a man drowning on dry land." I almost laughed. And for the first time since discovering the affair, I didn't feel like the victim. I felt like the one holding the strings. The afternoon sun burned as we returned from snorkeling, but the real heat was in the silence between the four of us. My husband barely spoke, Vanessa fiddled endlessly with her sunglasses, and Bradley played his role to perfection, attentive, charming, leaning close to me as if I were the only person on the ship. By the time we stepped back onto the deck, my husband finally snapped. He grabbed my elbow as Vanessa scurried inside. "What the hell are you doing here?" His voice was a harsh whisper, teeth clenched. I pulled free, meeting his eyes with deliberate calm. "Vacationing. Like you. Small world, isn't it?" His face flushed a dangerous shade. "This isn't what you think." "Don't insult me," I cut him off, my voice ice. "You booked a cruise with your lover and forgot the world isn't as blind as you'd like it to be." Before he could answer, Bradley appeared at my side, sliding his arm around my waist as if it had always belonged there. His presence shifted everything. My husband's fury collided with confusion, jealousy, and something almost like fear. That evening was the captain's gala, the ship's most formal event. If fate had placed us in the same ocean, I intended to let fate do the rest. I chose a crimson gown that shimmered under the lights, my hair swept into waves. When Bradley saw me in the lobby, he let out a low whistle, offering his arm. If the goal is to make them sweat, you might cause heat stroke. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and crystal. Guests lined up to greet the captain, laughter echoing over clinking glasses. And then there they were. My husband in a tuxedo he had never bothered to wear for me, Vanessa on his arm in a silver dress that tried too hard. Their eyes met ours across the room. It was electric, poisonous, undeniable. "Bradley." Vanessa's voice cracked as we approached. Her hand flew to her throat. What are you?" "Enjoying the cruise," Bradley said smoothly, his smile polished and cruel. "With an old friend." He squeezed my hand in silent solidarity. My husband looked like he might shatter his glass stem. "You planned this?" I tilted my head. "No, dear. You planned this. I just RSVP'd." The silence that followed was louder than the orchestra. Other guests began to notice the tension, whispers sparking like wildfire. Vanessa's cheeks flushed crimson, her fiancé's gaze pinning her like a spotlight. The four of us sat at the captain's table that night, a cruel stroke of luck, or maybe destiny. Every toast, every polite laugh, every camera flash from nearby tables caught us together, forced to perform. I leaned close to Bradley, whispering, "This is only the beginning." He nodded, his smile never wavering. By the time we dock, they'll wish they never stepped foot on this ship. Across the table, Vanessa's hand shook as she lifted her champagne glass. My husband tried to steady her, but the tremor had already spread into his voice, into the facade they had so carefully built. The cruise had only just begun, and already their paradise was cracking. By the third day, The ship no longer felt like a vacation, it felt like a stage. Every hallway, every dining room, every sunlit deck became an arena where four people circled one another, pretending at civility while venom brewed beneath. At breakfast, Bradley and I, accidentally, arrived at the same buffet line as them. Vanessa dropped her plate when she saw us, scrambled eggs splattering across the floor. My husband muttered something under his breath, but the crew rushed in with towels before he could spit his rage. Bradley bent, picked up a fresh plate, and handed it to me with theatrical gallantry. "Here you go, love." His voice carried just far enough. Vanessa's lip quivered. Later that morning, we lounged by the pool. I stretched out on a deck chair, sunglasses hiding the way my eyes tracked their every movement. My husband massaged sunscreen into Vanessa's shoulders, his touch too desperate, too performative. Bradley leaned over, his whisper slicing through the humid air. "He's overcompensating. He knows he's being watched." "Good," I murmured, sipping my drink. "Let him sweat." The breaking point came that evening at the Jazz Lounge. Dim lights, velvet chairs, a saxophone crooning low. Bradley and I sat near the stage, laughing over cocktails. Halfway through the second set, Vanessa and my husband walked in. They froze when they saw us, too late to retreat without making a scene. They sat 2 tables away, close enough for tension to strangle the air. Bradley raised his glass in a mock toast. "To unexpected company," he said loudly enough for them to hear. Vanessa couldn't take it. She stood abruptly, her chair screeching across the floor. "Bradley, can we talk?" "Outside. Now." He didn't flinch. "Anything you want to say, you can say here." My husband grabbed her wrist, hissing, "Sit down." But Vanessa was unraveling. Her voice rose, brittle and sharp. "You don't understand. It's not what it looks like." The entire lounge turned to watch. Conversations died. The saxophone faltered mid-note. Bradley's reply was calm, deliberate, lethal. "It's exactly what it looks like. You planned a romantic cruise with a married man, and you thought no one would ever find out." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My husband surged to his feet, fists clenched, but the spotlight was already on them. Vanessa's tears streaked her makeup, her diamond ring glinting like an accusation. I stood slowly, my voice slicing through the silence. "Enjoy the rest of your vacation, darling. You've earned it." Then I slipped my hand into Bradley's, and together we walked out, leaving them to drown in whispers and shame. Outside on the deck, the night air was sharp with salt and stars. Bradley exhaled heavily, his jaw tight. That was the first crack. Tomorrow it all collapses. And deep down, I knew he was right. The morning after the lounge disaster, whispers traveled faster than the sea breeze. Everywhere I walked, I caught fragments. Did you see them? The woman with her husband's lover. And the fiancé too, my God. Cruise ships are floating cities, but gossip makes them tiny. My husband avoided me like the plague, but I saw the cracks in his facade, forced laughter at breakfast, restless pacing on deck, a growing edge of panic. Vanessa, on the other hand, was unraveling publicly. Puffy eyes, smudged mascara, too much wine at lunch. Bradley, and I decided to escalate. We joined the salsa dancing class, something I'd never done in my life. The instructor paired us up, and soon Bradley was spinning me under the hot Caribbean sun, both of us laughing harder than expected. My laughter wasn't fake this time. It bubbled up, surprising me. And then I saw them. Vanessa stood frozen at the edge of the dance floor, watching Bradley's hands at my waist, his smile, the easy intimacy. My husband tugged her arm, whispering, but she couldn't look away. The betrayal she had so proudly built was being stolen, mirrored, mocked right in front of her. When the music ended, applause erupted. Bradley kissed my hand with exaggerated grace. The crowd cheered. Vanessa stormed off, heels clacking against the deck, my husband following in her wake. That night was formal dinner again. Bradley and I walked into the grand dining hall arm in arm, my sapphire dress shimmering under the chandeliers. Heads turned. Murmurs spread. By then, we were the ship's most infamous foursome. Halfway through the meal, my husband finally snapped. He slammed his fork onto the table and leaned across the linen cloth, his voice a low growl. "Enough. What do you want from me?" I set down my glass, calm as ever. "The truth. For once in your life." His face twisted. "This is a circus. You're humiliating yourself." Bradley cut in, voice like a blade. "No. She's humiliating you. You did that to yourself." Vanessa's eyes brimmed with tears. "Bradley, please, just listen." He turned to her, every word deliberate. "I gave you a ring. I gave you forever. And you threw it away for this." He gestured at my husband like he was nothing more than spoiled meat. The table went silent. Even the waiters froze. For the first time, I saw my husband without his mask of confidence. He looked small, pathetic, cornered. I leaned back, smiling faintly. "By the time this cruise ends, everyone on this ship will know exactly who you are. Not because I shouted it, but because you couldn't hide it." The orchestra struck up a waltz, as if mocking the silence that followed. Bradley offered me his hand. "Shall we?" I stood, leaving my husband and his lover sitting in the wreckage of their lives, while the two of us glided onto the dance floor. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt lighter. By day 4, the ship felt like a pressure cooker. My husband and Vanessa barely left their cabin, and when they did, it was only to argue in whispers sharp enough to cut glass. But whispers don't stay private on a cruise. By lunchtime, half the passengers were leaning in at their tables, waiting for the next scene in our twisted play. Bradley and I gave them one. The ship hosted a karaoke night in the main lounge. It was meant to be lighthearted, families cheering, couples laughing over cocktails. When Bradley signed us up for a duet, I nearly choked. "You're joking," I hissed. He grinned. "Not even a little. Trust me." Minutes later, we were on stage, spotlights glaring. My voice cracked on the first line, but Bradley's hand steadied mine, and soon the room erupted in laughter and claps. Not at our skill, but at the sheer audacity. We weren't just singing, we were performing together. When the song ended, the lounge roared with applause. And right then, the doors burst open. Vanessa stormed in, mascara streaked, hair disheveled, my husband close behind her. "You think this is funny?" she shrieked, pointing at us. The room fell silent. "You think you can just replace me like this?" Gasps. Whispers. Phones lifted discreetly to record. Bradley stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying. "Replace you? No, Vanessa. I'm just finally standing next to someone who doesn't lie to me." Her face crumpled. "It's not a lie, it's a vacation with another woman's husband." I cut in, my tone sharp enough to slice the air. "Call it what it is." My husband lunged forward, grabbing my wrist. "Enough. You're humiliating us." I yanked free, laughing bitterly. "No, darling. You did that yourself the moment you booked cabin 1243. The crowd erupted in murmurs. People craned their necks, whispering, "That's the husband, that's the fiancé." Vanessa broke then, sobbing into her hands. My husband stood rigid, jaw tight, but his eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. Every mask he had worn was gone. Bradley put his arm around me, steady as a rock. "We're done here," he said softly, guiding me off the stage. As we walked out, the applause came again, but this time, it wasn't for karaoke. It was for the truth. On the upper deck, the night air wrapped around us like a bomb. I leaned against the railing, my chest heaving, adrenaline still crackling through my veins. Bradley looked out at the endless dark sea. "Tomorrow's the captain's farewell dinner, the final act." I met his eyes, steady now. "And when the curtain falls, they'll have nothing left but each other, and everyone knowing exactly who they are." For the first time since it began, I felt ready for the ending. The captain's farewell dinner was meant to be the crown jewel of the voyage, a glittering evening of gowns, tuxedos, champagne, and polite laughter echoing under chandeliers. For me, it was the battlefield where the final masks would fall. I chose a midnight blue dress, sleek and deliberate, the kind that demanded attention without begging for it. Bradley appeared at my cabin door in a tailored suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his smile tight with resolve. "Ready?" he asked. "More than ever," I said and meant it. The dining hall sparkled with gold and crystal. Couples posed for photos at the grand staircase, children twirled in borrowed shoes. And then we saw them. Vanessa clung to my husband's arm, her gown wrinkled, her eyes swollen from nights of tears. He looked hollow, like a man clinging to a sinking ship. We approached slowly, each step echoing like a drumbeat. Conversations hushed. The infamous four were assembling for the last act. "Lovely evening," Bradley said smoothly as we reached the table. He pulled out my chair, his every gesture sharp with elegance. My husband's hands trembled around his glass. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. I tilted my head. "Doing what? Dining with a friend? You're the one who turned this into theater." Vanessa tried to salvage something, her voice cracking. "We didn't mean—" Bradley cut her off, his tone ice. "Didn't mean to get caught, you mean." The orchestra began to play a waltz. Couples rose to the floor, twirling under the chandeliers. Bradley stood and offered me his hand. "Shall we?" I accepted, letting him lead me into the swirl of silk and satin. All eyes followed us, them, as if the entire ship had been waiting for this moment. Halfway through the dance, my husband snapped. He stormed onto the floor, dragging Vanessa behind him. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, voice cracking across the hall. "You're making a fool of yourself, of all of us." Silence fell. Forks paused midair. The orchestra faltered, then stopped. I let go of Bradley's hand, turning to face him. My voice was calm, almost gentle. "No, love. I'm not the fool here." Vanessa sobbed openly, mascara streaking her cheeks. Bradley's jaw clenched as he stepped forward. "Tell them, Vanessa. Tell the truth. Or I will." Her lips trembled, but no sound came. The entire hall seemed to lean closer. My husband's face twisted, searching for an escape, but there was none. So I spoke for them. Clear, steady, deliberate. "My husband booked this cruise with his mistress. Her name is Vanessa. She is engaged to this man, Bradley. And they thought they could play at love while we stayed blind." Gasps spread like wildfire. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. The lie was dead, slaughtered in front of an audience dressed in jewels. My husband paled, Vanessa crumpled into her chair, and Bradley took my hand again, not in performance this time, but in solidarity. I smiled faintly at the stunned silence. Now everyone knows. The orchestra struck up again, hesitant at first, then stronger. Couples returned to the floor. The show went on, but for us, for them, it was over. The morning after the captain's farewell dinner, the ship felt eerily quiet. No more stolen glances, no more whispers behind napkins. The scandal had burned so brightly it left only ash. I passed couples at breakfast who smiled at me knowingly, some even nodding in silent respect. Others just stared, curiosity mixing with pity. But I didn't feel pitiful anymore. I felt lighter. Bradley joined me with 2 coffees in hand. He looked tired but steady. "They checked out early," he said, sliding into the chair opposite me. "Of course they did," I replied. "Nowhere left to hide." We ate in silence for a while, the ocean rolling endless and calm outside the windows. Then he spoke, softer. Last week I thought I was days away from marrying her. Now I don't even recognize the person I loved." I met his eyes. I thought I knew my husband, too. Turns out he was a stranger sleeping beside me for years. There was no bitterness left in my voice, just truth. When the ship docked in Miami, paparazzi weren't waiting, but the whispers followed us off like shadows. Vanessa avoided Bradley's gaze, clutching her luggage with shaking hands. My husband tried once, just once, to meet my eyes. But whatever he hoped to find there was gone. I turned away. Bradley and I walked down the gangway together, not as lovers, not as some new romance, but as 2 people who had survived the same storm. At the curb, we paused. "So," he said, adjusting his bag, "what now?" I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Now, I go home, file the papers, start over." He nodded. "Me too." A beat, then a half-smile. "Though, if you ever feel like planning another trip, maybe without the theatrics." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time since it all began. "I'll keep that in mind." We parted ways then, each stepping into new lives carved out of betrayal and resilience. Later that night, I unpacked my suitcase in a quiet apartment. No husband's shoes by the door. No charade to keep up. Just me, and the echo of waves still in my ears. For 15 years, I had been the woman who tolerated, who forgave, who endured. But on that ship, standing beside Bradley, I realized something. I wasn't broken. I was free. And as the city lights blinked outside my window, I whispered to myself, almost smiling. They thought it would be their paradise. But it became mine.